Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sachi Gurumayam, and I am your moderator for this session. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all. I am the director of a company called Agrimium GmbH based in Switzerland, but I also look after the Africa and South Asia businesses for a biologicals company called Egg by Tech, which is headquartered in Texas. Now, we all know that agriculture is the foundation of any development. There has been no industrial revolution anywhere where agriculture has not proceeded. So food security, good nourishment, nutritious diet, that's important for people to have the time to go and think and do innovative stuff that leads to industrial revolution. So it's a pleasure to host some very experienced and exciting panelists here today. We're still waiting for one of our panelists, Atsuko, to join us from the African Development Bank, but we have with us Keys Berbick from Rabobank, we have Sami Khan from CDC, and we have Uche Orji from the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. Now, just following the order of the announcement, what we will do is we'll skip Atsuko and go straight to Keys, and then we'll include Atsuko once he's able to join. To introduce Keys, when we were having some of the planning discussions, Keys told me, Sachi, I've lived two lives, and I'm living my second one right now. The first one was before 40, and the second one's after 40. And I said, what does that mean? He said, oh, before 40, I went to study agricultural economics. I worked around the world selling and developing and selling cotton seeds. And at 40, I decided that I want to do something different and join the development banking sector. So Keys is currently the Chief Representative Officer for Rabobank in East Africa, based out of Nairobi. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, Keys, and over to you. So.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for introducing me. I will not say much about myself. I think it's what you say is evident. I spent first part of my life actually selling cotton seeds and buying and selling cotton as well a little bit. But since I'm 40, I'm a very boring banker and try to be an agricultural banker as well. Rabobank, a fairly large Dutch bank, outside the Netherlands, solely a niche bank, financing agriculture and food and agribusiness. In Africa, since 2005, we took minority shares, significant minority shares, in 5 banks. There we get our feet wet, and each of these banks we try to steer towards agricultural lending. So in that period, 10-year period, I think we had a lot of experience financing value chains, left and right, having successes, but also a lot of failures actually. I do think actually that agricultural lending is not easy. It's not for every bank. I do think in the African context, it's rather a specialized thing. When I was working with NMB in Tanzania, agriculture was always a difficult book. We always needed outside credit enhancement or insurance or help in order to make that book profitable. So it is really a challenge, especially the low input, low risk type of agriculture, hand hoeing, rain fed. It is just not easy to finance. We working with other people's money, like any other bank. Our business model is actually to be 98, 99% sure that our money is being repaid. And that is not easy actually. When I was working in Tanzania, financing 7 or 8 or 9 value chains, there was always a crisis in one, which actually brought the book down and increased our non-performance ratios. So it's very specialized. In my view, it needs to go hand in hand with technology providers and increasing also the value in the value chain. That will make it much easier. Lastly, of course, a big volume of very small loans. So technology, data, geodata, will be very, very important in the future. And I think actually the jury is still out, but these are exciting times. And also our bank is committed to innovate and to find something actually which will be interesting for the masses of agricultural lending in Africa.
Thank you, Keith. And we will come back to some of your points, and I'm sure the audience has questions, members of the audience. So please continue to post your questions in the chat box, and we will pick up the questions towards the second half of the session when we'll have a Q&A session. So allow me to then introduce Sami Khan. Sami has an interesting profile. So he was born in India, but he was raised in Singapore, educated in the US, and has worked pretty much all around the world, and is now based out of London, and with 20, 25, 23 years of experience in supply chain development, private equity. I think he's done pretty much everything that needs to be done for agriculture. I think you even manage a farm, right, Sami? So it's a pleasure to have you with us, and over to you, Sami.
Thank you very much, Sachi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's indeed a pleasure and honor to be part of such an impressive panel at Sahel's 10th year anniversary conference. And many congrats to Sahel on this auspicious occasion. So CDC Group is, I'm with CDC Group, and CDC Group is the world's oldest development financial institution impact investor with a 71-year history of investing in the food and agriculture sector across Africa. And this equates to roughly 410 investments over the last 70 years, which equates to about $6 billion roughly in cumulative investments, if you were to include that or count that in today's money terms. We played a transformational and pioneering role in the global food and agri sector. We were the key pioneer in the development of the oil palm sector in Southeast Asia. We also played a very critical role in the development of the Kenya tea industry and bringing it towards global competitiveness. We remain optimistic on the food and agri potential in Africa, and that optimism and realism has been shaped by over 7 decades of investments in Africa, including the lessons we have learned in the potential for Africa to carve a niche, to achieve comparative advantage in select agri-supply chains at a global level and address food security and sustainability. So you may ask, what are some of the key learnings from this 7 decades of experience in food and agriculture in Africa? Our experience shows that transformative, impactful, and commercially viable investments can be achieved in the long term whilst working with smallholder farmers. And we also learned that one of the key success factors is to sequence investments, approach it in a modular fashion, starting with establishing a proof of concept and then gradually scaling it up and involving outgrowers and smallholders. And of course, that needs to be supported with on-the-ground knowledge and networks. We have also learned that the achievement of development impact and commercial objectives in the food and agriculture space in Africa requires patient capital. And in many cases, there is an element of high-level upfront capital investment, and that success needs to be judged using a long-term lens, so to speak. Recently, CDC has revitalized its food and agriculture strategy with a view towards enhancing our investment footprints across the continent. It takes into account lessons from the past and regional dynamics that we are facing, and development challenges and market failures that need to be overcome. So we have positioned this into 5 high-level strategic themes. First and foremost is raising productivity and building scale in food and agribusiness, which is crucial to lifting incomes and developing businesses operating at scale with a distinguishable comparative advantage. Second is to support the development of an integrated and inclusive value chain. Now, this is very important because we take a farm to fork approach, which links upstream agriculture consisting of smallholder farmers operating under a contract farming structure or some sort of a formalized volume aggregation format, linking domestic value addition and processing supported by post-harvest infrastructure and logistics footprint. But central to this whole equation of an integrated value chain is the need to have a long-term secure partnership with commercial partners downstream in the form of long-term buyback or offtake arrangements. These partners can be regional, local food players, or large-scale international, global, multinational companies. We also want to broaden the access to affordable and nutrition foods products. Uh, we have an initiative to support climate resilient and sustainable business models. So we support private sector companies that deploy or sustainable approaches or exhibit some sort of climate resilience in the model using both adaptation and mitigation approaches. Last but not least, we believe in the power of technology, that leveraging technology innovation for systemic transformation could lead to the productivity increase and livelihood benefits across the spectrum over the long term. So we realize that some of these technologies could be potential game changers. I'm not going to go into all the details of various technologies, but we need to focus on those aspects of technology and the relevant components that are scalable, affordable, and practical in the context of Africa. So this is a nascent space in Africa, and we realize that maybe a non-traditional approach may be required and will certainly involve multiple stakeholders consisting of the private sector, government entities, various types of lenders, technology, and mobile companies. To make a long story short, we strongly believe in the power of the private sector in driving the transformation of the African food and agriculture sector towards impact and commercial success over the long term. It's a long journey, and we are very keen to partnership and participate in this journey along with other DFIs, MNCs, sovereign wealth funds, PE funds, commercial banks, and strategic investors, many of whom are sitting on this impressive panel today. Perhaps at this juncture, I'd like to hand it back to you, Sachi.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you very much. And I've already got some questions for you, but we'll come to that. As for our audience, please continue to post your questions and comments in the chat box. So allow me to then move on to the next panelist. And I see Atsuko's joined us. So great, Atsuko. We'll come to you once Uche has spoken. So Uche is the MD of the Nigeria Sovereign. Hello, Uche, can you hear me?
Hello. Hi, it's not Uche, unfortunately. Good afternoon, gentlemen. This actually unfortunately coincides with our board committee meeting, so he's literally just stepped away and asked me to fill in for him temporarily, but he'll be back shortly. Just by way of introduction, my name is Tyra Ajayi. I actually head agriculture investments for the NSIA, and basically asked me to fill in while he attends to a few other issues. But just to give you a bit of background as to what the NSIA's role is in terms of the development of agriculture. Agriculture is one of the NSI's focus areas. We classify it as one of our key sectors of focus in terms of infrastructure development. And you know, Sammy has actually touched on a number of points in terms of how we view and have chosen to approach the development of the Nigerian agriculture sector. We're doing so by what he classed as identifying a proof of concept. We're doing that by engaging in the development of a fully integrated animal feed processing business. When we got involved in this project, it originally started off as one aspect of the value chain, mainly processing. And so we have, at this point, started to focus on fully integrating this project through focusing on the primary agriculture itself, the growing of the grains which are required to serve as input to the processing of the animal feed. But beyond that, it's also enabled us to learn a number of things in terms of the process of developing agriculture, one of which is another thing Sammy touched on, which is the need for critical downstream infrastructure. The local production in Nigeria is hindered quite significantly by the lack of supporting infrastructure in terms of storage, be it in terms of mechanization, irrigation, things along those lines, which are heavily impacting the low yield that farmers are currently experiencing. So we have gone into this project under a joint venture agreement with the Old Mutual Group of South Africa. We're actually partnered with UFF African Agri Investments, who I'm sure are quite familiar to Sammy and other members of the panel today. And this project really for us is to leverage on the expertise of UFF, who currently have over 20 farms across Africa and $300+ million of assets under management, by focusing on our strengths, the advantages we bring as a sovereign wealth, ensuring that we create a conducive environment both for local and international investors into the agriculture sector. UFF have provided us with a lot of experience with the on-hand technical know-how and agronomy required to actually ensure the development of the project is done to international standard, is done with best practice, is done with a level of technology that will ensure that the project is successful. What we have done as the Sovereign Wealth Fund and co-sponsors of this project is bring the patient capital that Sam referred to, is work on creating an environment that ensures that UFF and other investors are more comfortable with the level of risk that they face in terms of realizing a return on their investment. Through other initiatives that we're discussing with the likes of the FNB, with other DFIs as to how we can further develop the infrastructure required to support agriculture in the country, we see a huge amount of opportunity in the space.
Thank you. Very good, very valid points, of course. If you don't mind me saying so, would you mind repeating your name slowly for the benefit of
Tayo
us?
Ajayi.
Tayo Ajayi. Okay. And you had investment, agricultural. Tayo, nice to meet you, and thank you for jumping in last minute. I think you did very well. So our last panelist is Atsuko, and she's having internet connection, so she's just dropped out to come back in again. But maybe while we wait for Atsuko to join, I hear a lot of background noise from, I don't know whose microphone it is. Okay. So maybe we just get started with some of the questions, and then once Atsuko joins, I will introduce her to give her 5 minutes on the African Development Bank and what it's doing. I had a couple of questions for Sammy, yourself, and one member unit. And the question from Ikwechuku is, what do they, how would you be interested in investing? Let me turn that around and make it a more general question. How you talked about partnership and how that brings about scale and impact. If somebody wanted to partner with you, what do they need to do?
Thank you for the question. So, of course, like the other DFIs and other commercial investors, we will look at obviously both the developmental merits and the commercial merits of the proposed investment. And of course, naturally, the background of the partners and the track record. Traditionally, we do not engage in greenfield projects, but on a selective basis, we do. We will also obviously want to look at the subsectors that the project is involved in. Our sector-driven approach has allowed us to develop a focus on 5 specific sectors that we want to work with partners on: food processing, agri-inputs, high-value crops, animal protein, forestry. And of course, the enablers that we talked about earlier on food and agriculture infrastructure, logistics, and agtech. Traditionally, or as part of the new strategy, we do have a minimum capital requirement for our partners. It's not written in stone, but for equity, we look at anything above $20 million and above. For debt is $25 million and above. But we do have a lot of flexibility in how we work with the partners. We can apply a traditional growth capital mindset. We can deploy what we call catalyst capital. Catalyst capital is essentially capital that allows us to take a long-term patient view with the sort of concessionary focus, take additional risks. We have grant capital and venture capital. We can participate with the partners in the form of equity, debt, risk-sharing agreements, and at the same time, a lot of investee companies have the benefit of enjoying our technical assistance facilities where we help to build up the soft issues in addition to the hard issues. We also help build up the capacity development, allow for new innovative pilots to take place, training of farmers. And finally, when we work with the partners, we have the options to exercise flexibility in deploying multiple channels, whether it be through direct investment, through funds, permanent capital vehicles, joint ventures, or special purpose vehicles. Back to you, Sachi.
Thank you, Sami. I see that we've got Atsuko with us now. So welcome back, Atsuko. What I want to do is, Atsuko, maybe if you could spend 5 minutes just giving a quick talk. So Atsuko and I have known each other for a long time. We are both fans of Nigeria. We were both posted in Nigeria at the time when Minister Adesina was driving what he described earlier as government-enabled and private sector-driven transformation. So we were both part of that transformation. And it's a pleasure to have you back with us, Atsuko. Over to you.
Very much, Shachi, and thank you to the other members of the panel. It's really great to be in touch with you all. Like Shachi said, yes, I am a huge fan of Nigeria, and I think with regards to Nigeria, you have to love it to work there. So absolutely, that's one thing that Shachi and I share. Just with regards to a few comments that I'd really like to make, and maybe provoke the other panel members. I know you've been having a really rich conversation. Just with regards to the African environment, I think what's very interesting is that a lot of governments are putting in place conducive business environments for larger companies to invest and grow. We've seen countries like our neighbors, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Senegal, Rwanda, Nigeria, Ethiopia, making strides in attracting investment. So I think it's really important at this time to continue the promotion of these business environments, and I think companies have a huge role to play. Secondly, I'm sure that everybody touched upon it already, the medium-sized players, and I'm going to distinguish between small and medium. We really need to help them to scale and consolidate. We've seen that there are proven solutions in the medium enterprise space, and we need them to grow. The second thing is for smaller players, what really hits smaller players is really the red tape, the lengthy business registration investment procedures. We need decision makers and policy makers, governments to understand the voice, the needs of SMEs, the small players, and that's extremely important. I'm sure it's on the clear growth of agro-processed goods in the cities, and therefore the need for more intra-African trade. And so, as the African Development Bank, we're very much promoting this more kind of free border type, starting with agro-processed goods. And I'm really hoping that in the ecosystem we can work with players. One of the things that we have found that we're trying to put a more focus on is working with institutional investors, and I'm happy to see our friend Uche here from NSIA, but really seeing how we can take institutional investors and promote projects that are productive investments that institutional investors can actually put their investments in. So really identifying productive investments where institutional investors are not looking outside, but looking within their countries to invest, provide the infrastructure that many of these companies so much need. I'm sure there were many, many points where I haven't been able to listen to, but as the African Development Bank, we'd like to partner with Rabo, we'd like to partner with CDC, with SEMI, with the institutional investors like Uche to really create an environment whereby we're taking much more, financing much more of the ecosystem. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Atsuko. Thank you. And we've got a few questions, and I have a good one for, I think, how you might, on your point about working together. But I see a question here, which was related to smallholder farmers who have a relatively, little say in what goes on. And I think, the questions focus on East Africa, Tanzania, and also West Africa. But maybe, Keys, this is something, considering that you worked with thousands of smallholder farmers in Tanzania, maybe, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. There's only one way to finance small farmers, and that is to use some form of organization of these farmers and to finance the value chain, as has been mentioned by all of the speakers, I guess. I think the key to that actually is creating more value in the value chain. Everybody would be excited when a bank or a technology provider goes hand in hand and increases actually the value in the value chain. I believe actually in value chains which are like for instance cotton in Kenya or Tanzania, where there is so little value in the value chain, you know, it's almost nothing to divide between the different players. But if you come and there is a clear value, everybody get excited. I think, you know, demonstration plots, technology providers, extension workers, these actually should be on the ground, and it's very difficult for a bank to play that role actually, and that's why I said that, you know, agriculture is, in my view, very specialized lending and goes hand in hand with the extension service and with other actually farm organization types. Yeah, so my clear answer is increase the value in the value chain, and everybody will be excited to work together.
Thank you, Kees. And I think that goes in line with what Sefer was asking and answering in terms of value chain and other players being required. So I'm looking at one of the other questions, Sammy, is, you know, somebody, you know, if they want to work with CDC, what is the best way to get in touch? I guess, you know, since you mentioned, you talked about 20 million equity, 5 million debt, I think there are some interested investees out there.
Sure. What I could suggest is I'm looking after the strategy for food and agriculture at CDC, which cuts across all the product platforms. What I could suggest, if they want to get in touch with CDC, they can send me an email and I can put them in touch with the right investment teams. If they have some sort of a business proposition or investment memorandum or a business plan, to forward it to myself, and again I will forward it to the necessary investment team. But having said that, there will be a lot of opportunities as we move forward for us to work in a partnership approach, similar to what Asuka was mentioning, and whether it be with African Development Bank or Rabobank or a sovereign wealth fund. You know, it has to be a joint approach. If you look at a long-term perspective of where we want food and agriculture sector to be in Africa, it requires multiple strategic and innovative partnerships to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Of course, there is a request here for your contact details, so I leave that to you. If you want to share, please type it in the chat box. Now, Atsuko, you have a question from Albert, who wants to know, what challenges have you encountered working with finance institutions in different countries with respect to providing finance for value chain development?
I think there's multiple challenges, and thanks, Albert, for the question. I think number one, financial institutions, particularly in Nigeria, have more investable or easier return type opportunities. So whether it be gas and oil, whether it be the tech space, whether it be other investments that they just find easier, number one, to do. Number two, I think the desks in the financial institutions are risk averse by nature. So I think when we're talking to financial institutions, we really have to talk to the risk officers. Number three, I think there's an issue of capacity building and appraisal techniques. So when there is no land as collateral, it is so difficult to get commercial financial institutions to lend. And that's why DFIs like ourselves, whether it be CDC, whether it be AFP, we need to provide risk sharing facilities to be able to transfer some of that risk, to show how commercially viable actually these opportunities are. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Atsuko. You know, we continue to have requests for contact details, so please look into that. And I think, unfortunately, there was a request for for Uche or Tayo, but hopefully they'll come back and then we can close that question. I think I have a question around, you know, what you mentioned about small, medium enterprises. I mean, Sami, you obviously spoke about big ticket investments, $20 million, $5 million, $5 million in debt. Atsuko, you focused on the need for medium, mid-sized players. Now, mid-sized players aren't necessarily capable of absorbing $20 million in equity, not just yet. How do you bridge that? I mean, do you do any of those, or does Rabobank, play in that environment? Who will bridge that gap? So anybody who would like to answer?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we, in 5 countries where we have retail banks, or we participate in retail banks, we have to do everything. So we are a bank, and any proposition we have a look at. But for the smaller ones, it is really a challenge. And in my view, I keep saying, specialized agricultural lending, every value chain has its own structure, needs to be designed, need to be creative people, use all the technology you can, and create value in the value chain. Yeah, I think partnerships are very important. People who take out the big risk. We actually, our experience of 10 years financing agricultural in Africa, especially smallholders, has not been an overnight success. It has been trial and error. It has been difficult. And agriculture is mean. There's no rain, no fertilizers at one point. And we have, we work with people, with other people's money in a way. So I think in agricultural lending, smallholders, partnerships, value chain approach, increase the value, and for each and every value chain, a different structure. A very creative team you need actually in these agricultural lending sections of commercial banks. And yet, it's true, almost in all banks, other sectors have better returns. So you need to have passion and determination to be an agricultural lender. And that's actually the roots of Rabobank. 130 years ago was that farmers were dissatisfied with the banks and there was no lending to agriculture. And the same actually is happening now in Africa. It's very difficult to really mobilize large sums of money. Pilots, everybody can do a pilot.
Yeah.
But to scale up is I've not seen much actually. And that's the challenge we have, I think.
Thank you, Kees. Atsuko, Sami, if you would like to add anything.
What I could just say is that consistent with our strategic investment theme of developing integrated inclusive supply chains, a lot of the stuff we do, whether it be in equity, debt, ensures there's a significant benefit to smallholders, whether it be financing contract farming operations in East Africa, or trade supply chains, or providing debt facilities for coffee and cocoa in West Africa. We ensure that in the integrated value chain, there's a significant component of smallholders. Usually, smallholders are integrated into the supply chain and operate under maybe a contract farming structure or a part of a sort of outgrower program or farmer producer organization. But that's very important for us. Whilst we do want to create critical mass, we believe that it's a step-by-step process. And this certainly is very important for us to have smallholders involved in this.
I could just add to that, Shachi. Kees and Sami said it all, so I won't repeat, but I think what's very important is 2 things on the African continent. There's much more need for equity. So structures like FAFIN are absolutely critical. There is not enough equity on the market, so that's one. And it's amazing that the Ministry of Agriculture at that time was able to co-invest in such a structure for equity. Then number 2, I think the public development banks have to play a larger role to leverage commercial lending. So if the public development banks that have a mandate and can absorb some of that risk, and the return profile is, they should play a larger role, they're government mandated, and they should go out there and get those.
Thank you, Atsuko. Let me pose you all a common question, and I want to hear your thoughts in terms of. By the way, we have another 5 to 10 minutes to go. We've been given an extra 5 minutes on the basis that we started a little late with the technical challenges. Now, with big money comes big responsibility. And Sami, you talked about in Indonesia and the challenges around agriculture, greenfield versus brownfield, and so on. How do you make sure that the investments or the loans and the equity investments that you're making are responsibly done? Who wants to start?
I can start if you don't mind, just from a CDC perspective. So we have a in-house development impact team. Does the slicing and dicing and assessment of all investment proposals to ensure there's long-term sustainable development impact. And those development impact objectives are threefold. One is economic opportunities. Three is that means creating jobs. Second is about nutrition and food affordability. And the last one is related to sustainability and climate change. And of course, you can break them down into the subcomponents. The development impact team is also supported by a world-class ESG team that has developed a very robust toolkit for not just our investment professionals, but our investee companies to follow to ensure the development impact is lasting and inclusive.
I could come in here and maybe flip the question also to Sami's point. Actually, when it comes to DFIs, we are actually almost painful about this responsibility and socially ESG standards. So I think it's really, as a development community, a finance community, how can we work together to shorten these timelines to execution? Because companies and businesses cannot wait forever. So if there was a way to do that, because we focus so much on the development impact, we could take 1 to 2 years. Meanwhile, the business is needing the money within at least 5 to 6 months. So I think we need to work together to lower the risks and then also heighten that development impact, but transform the timeline.
Thank you, Atsuko. Keith, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, to the last point, I mean, as a retail bank doing thousands of SMEs, we don't have the, although the bank prides itself having a sustainable finance framework, and we do a lot of these new sustainable bonds and issue all that. I think we might be the number 1 or 2 in the world. Yet on the retail level, on the smallholder level, obviously, you have to take some generalizations, in saying, well, this has impact, and we certainly not, the same as the DFIs. We need to move. People need to have a credit approved in 6 weeks. Timelines are very important for us. So every loan we judge on sustainability, but obviously we cannot do the same type of due diligence which maybe you ought to do or would be in the perfect world. We're not living in that, actually.
Thank you. I think there is a question directed to Rabobank here about whether you have pay-as-you-go schemes to work with small growers who want to have equipment access.
Yeah, we only have that through our partner banks, in which we have significant minority shares in 5 countries, with NMB in Tanzania, Zambia, etc. So yeah, we don't have ourselves. We do this through the partner retail banks in Africa.
Thank you. And we have a question here from Professor Sozi Adelaza. I think maybe, Atsuko, you're better positioned to answer this one around risk and return. If you're talking about countries where, there are conflicts and challenges, fragile institutions and so on, obviously you need to find a way to de-risk that. How would you go about doing it at the African Development Bank?
In terms of business in general, and I think, of course, fragile and transition states included, especially, agribusiness in Africa is expensive. The transaction costs, the risks, all of those are high. So the question then is, how do we work together to lower those risks? And I think policy is a big part of it, and infrastructure is another big part of it. And I think that's why we need to leverage institutional investors for those productive investments. But we, as a DFI community, and that's why I'm reaching out to Keith, reaching out to Sami, to say we need to work together. better information, we need more commercial analysis, investment, all of that to put together an agribusiness investment. So that's the best I can say. It's a combination of finance, policy, and infrastructure to be able to get the returns that we need on these agribusiness investments, and we need to start working together.
Thank you. Thank you, Atsuko. Tayo, good to see you again. We've had a few questions for you in between.
I apologize. We're having a few technical issues, but I'm back.
Okay. Tayo, if you don't mind, if you could please share your email addresses so that the audience can direct their questions directly to you after the session. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay.
And I think.
Okay. Hello?
Are we still here?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I lost you for a second, but you're back now.
Okay. If you don't mind sharing your email address, Tayo, I think that would help everybody. I think considering that we have just a few more minutes left, the original plan was to have each one of us say a minute or so on a, sum up. But let me maybe end with a question. We've all talked about the need for integration, value chain based financing, how we need to come together, a holistic approach. Everybody needs to partner with the other. Let me ask you, and use it as an opportunity to ask questions, close it, whichever way you want to do it. But whose responsibility is it to put all this together? The bank's interested in the money. The farmers, got to farm, and others, want to sell inputs and so on. But whose responsibility is it to put this together? Maybe we start with you, Atsuko. 1 minute.
Okay. Whose responsibility is it? I think it's a mutual responsibility if we want this transformation to happen. Everybody's been talking about this food system transformation, this incredible environment after COVID. So I think as a development community with the private sector, we need to actually make this our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Atsuko. Uche, you haven't had much of the floor, so over to you.
Okay, this is Tyre again. I think I agree completely with what Asuka just said. I think it would be a joint or mutual responsibility. Overall, I think the end goal, we are all on the same page, or we have a mutual objective in terms of developing this sector. But obviously, there are different criteria with regards to how we all look at these things individually, either being a commercial bank or being a DFI. Or being, a farmer, a small-scale farmer. So I think we all have to share that responsibility. We all have to be willing to bring to the table each one of our own experiences and expertise to ensure, like I said, we create a conducive environment for both the small-scale farmers, but at the same time provide attractive returns for the commercial investor.
Thank you. Keys, over to you. Now we have 30 seconds, unfortunately, because we're...
No, I agree. It needs to be a coalition of a few people, but clearly, private sector, there should be some way of profitability in the whole value chain. And if that is the case, I think players like us, we will engage because it actually it's in our interest to lend out money and get it back with an interest rate and make some profit on the line. And that's actually the essence of private sector. But I think we need a coalition here. And we need billions actually of money. It's not small, it's big.
Thank you. So coalition, Sammy, any last words from you?
Yeah, in concluding remarks from my side, the private sector has a capability basically to transform the food and agriculture sector in Africa in the long term. It's going to be a journey that requires innovative funding measures and partnerships anchoring on long-term patient capital. And we as CDC Group are committed to being a crucial financial and strategic partner in this journey moving forward.
Brilliant. With that, look, we started with technical challenges, but like any other day, we managed to come to an agreement. We managed to answer all the points. Members had an interactive session. Thank you very much. you, everyone. And yes, enjoy the rest of the event.